Week 14 of the fantasy football season, and he has tight end start sits every matchup this week. Thursday Night Football, one of the worst games it most likely will be this week. New England Patriots at the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Hunter Henry, it's been a tough season for him. I know he got off to a good start the first 3-4 weeks of the year, finding the end zone, putting up good fantasy points. But the last month of the season, we really haven't seen much from Hunter Henry. And this week in a tough matchup at the Steelers, he's a sit. Pat Freiermuth is a start for me. I know Freiermuth, he didn't do much in last week's game, but now with Mitchell Trubisky in the lineup, I think he could spread the football out more, and he's got more arm strength than Kenny Pickett, who obviously he's going to be out now for a few weeks with his injury. So a big game for Pittsburgh. They got to get this offense going. I know the run game with Warren and Harris has been decent this season, but if they want to play better football and make some plays, I think Pat Freiermuth, he's going to be a vocal point in this ball game, and he's a start. Now to the Carolina Panthers at the New Orleans Saints. Hayden Hurst, we haven't seen much from him this season. He's a sit. Tommy Tremble, if he's not scoring a touchdown, he's pretty much been a red zone tight end for this Panther team and no fantasy value. So both sits. Taysom Hill, he's a start. Obviously, if Derek Carr's out of this game, we're going to see more packages for Taysom Hill, and he does it all. He catches the football. Obviously, they put him in at the goal line packages, and when they need him to throw a little bit, he does that as well. So this week in a good matchup versus the Panthers, he's a start. Juwan Johnson, he had a couple decent games, and then last week he didn't do anything. And at this point of the season, week 14, a crucial week for many fantasy owners, he's a sit as well. Los Angeles Rams at the Baltimore Ravens. Tyler Higbee had a nice ball game a few weeks ago at the Arizona Cardinals with 2 touchdowns, but last week he didn't do much, and he left the game as well banged up. So even if he does play as Tyler Higbee, he's not really a tight end that's been consistent and making plays, and he's the 4th or 5th option on this offense behind Cooper Kupp, behind Puka Nacua, behind Kyren Williams. Even DeMarcus Robinson and Tutu Atwell have made some plays this season. So he's a sit. Isaiah Likely a start. We know tight end's a big vocal point of this offense for this Baltimore Raven team. And Likely, he's a good athlete and a good tight end yards after catch. So with Mark Andrews out for the season, he's going to have to step up and make plays. And we saw in his first start in Week 12 at the Chargers, he had 4 catches, 40 yards. So I think Likely, once again, could put up similar numbers to that, or even have a monster ball game. Now to the Indianapolis Colts at the Cincinnati Bengals. Kylan Granson had his best game of his career, 3 catches, 72 yards in last week's game. But that was a little fluky in my opinion. The tight ends really don't get targeted over there in Indianapolis. So this week he's a sit. Now to the Bengals, Drew Sample, Tanner Hudson, pretty much a lot of 2 tight end sets over there with Jake Browning, a quarterback for this Bengal team. But I got to see a little bit more out of these guys to have confidence to put them in the starting lineup where they can contribute and put up fantasy points, especially now with a playoff week kind of this week for most owners, and the playoffs coming up. Jacksonville Jaguars at the Cleveland Browns. Evan Ingram, he's a start for me. I know Ingram, one of the better tight ends in the league, and we know Trevor Lawrence possibly could be out a while. We still got to wait word and see what the diagnosis is. So Ingram coming off a monster game on Monday Night Football versus Cincinnati Bengals in a tough loss. Trevor Lawrence going down, but even if it's C.J. Beathard for an extended period of time, I think Evan Ingram's going to get a lot of targets. Obviously, for backup quarterbacks and quarterbacks who don't really have a lot of experience in terms of starting games, they always rely on the tight end. So Evan Ingram, believe it or not, his targets might go up over the next few weeks if Trevor Lawrence is out. And we know Ingram is a playmaker. You can line him up anywhere in the formation, the inside, outside. He's got great speed, and we saw it on display in Week 13's game. So no matter who the quarterback is, Ingram's still a tight end I like, and he's a start. David Njoku is a start as well for me. I know last week he didn't do much in that game as David Njoku, but another tight end that's athletic, can move around the formation. He's got good hands, and he definitely works the middle of the field. And I know him and Joe Flacco don't really have a rapport yet, but if it's Joe Flacco in this game, the numbers probably will drop off a little bit once again for Njoku. But if it's Thompson Robinson, a young quarterback security blanket is always the tight end. But either way, I think the Njoku week in and week out has proved this season he could be a tight end that could go out there and make plays and help fantasy owners, and he's a start this week. Detroit Lions at the Chicago Bears. Sam Laporta, one of the better tight ends already in the league in his rookie season. And last week he had a monster ball game going over 120 yards and finding the end zone. So him and Jared Goff had great chemistry, especially in the red zone. He's a big threat and pretty much unguardable. Sam Laporta has been this season. If it's safeties or linebackers, it just doesn't matter. Now Cole Kmet, he's a start for me as well. Cole Kmet, he's been a pretty decent tight end this year for the Chicago Bears. And now to come off the bye week, and Justin Fields to get a little bit healthier as well, where we know him and Kmet have had good rapport over the last season and change. I think Cole Kmet in a mini shootout like we saw with these two teams a few weeks ago can have a nice ball game and put up fantasy points Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Atlanta Falcons. So Cade Otton, a borderline option for me. I know Otton, he's had some decent ball games this season, but there's some games like we saw last week where he's not really putting up numbers at all. So this week I know it's a better matchup at the Atlanta Falcons, but at this point in a Week 14 game, which is crucial for fantasy owners, he's not really a tight end I have interest in playing, so he's a borderline option at best. Kyle Pitts to start. I know Kyle Pitts, the numbers really haven't been there this season for Pitts. He's had a couple nice games and a couple games where he didn't really do much this week versus Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a defense that definitely is beatable, even though Kyle Pitts has one of the worst quarterbacks in the league with Desmond Ridder. I still will put him in the starting lineup because it just takes one or two big plays for him to have a decent ball game. Houston Texans at the New York Jets. Dalton Schultz, he missed last week's game versus the Denver Broncos, and hopefully he's back in this week's game, and they definitely need him now with Tank Dell out of the lineup and out for the season with the broken leg. So Dalton Schultz, we know he's been a solid tight end. We know he's got the knack for the end zone as well, and he was a CJ Stroud favorite in that offense behind Nico Collins and Tank Dell. But like I said, with Dell out, and if Schultz could get back, more targets are going to come his way. And if he's just not playing, Brevin Jordan's the starting tight end then for this Texan team, and he made a couple plays in last week's game versus the Denver Broncos, but he's another tight end we don't know much about. He hasn't really seen much of the field, and he will be a sit for me. Tyler Conklin a sit. I know Conklin number 2 on the team in receptions and targets behind Garrett Wilson, but this Jet team each week, it just gets worse and worse at the quarterback position. It didn't matter if it's Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle, or even Trevor Siemian, who came late in that ball game in the loss versus the Falcons. So Tyler Conklin, even being the number 2 guy on the offense in the passing game, is a sit. Seattle Seahawks at the San Francisco 49ers, Noah Fant a sit. Noah Fant, I know last week made a few plays, and there was a broken play as well where he got big yards at the Dallas Cowboys. But this week it's a tougher matchup at the 49ers, where they're more of a stouter defense than the Cowboys, in my opinion, because that Cowboy defense is feast or famine. They could go off and have a monster game, or there's games where they give up a lot of points on the board. But this Niner team, for the most part, they keep opponents in check. And this week, I don't see Noah Fant really doing much. George Kittle, he's a star, one of the better tight ends in the league, yards after catch. And him and Brock Purdy, last season we saw it at the end of the year, he was a touchdown machine. And this season, we've seen George Kittle do a little bit of everything. Screens, we've seen him take for big yards, obviously be a big red zone threat, and a few games as well this year going over 100 yards. So this week, he's a start. And we saw Jake Ferguson have a nice game versus defense as well. TJ Hawkinson and the Vikings at the Vegas Raiders. Hawkinson, he's a top 1 or 2 tight end. He's pretty much right there with Travis Kelce on the season, has taken that number 1 spot. So Hawkinson, a great route runner. It doesn't matter who his quarterback is. Kirk Cousins and him had a great rapport, and we've seen him have some big games already with Joshua Dobbs over the last month of the season. So this week here versus middle of the pack Raider defense, indoor game, which is always a plus. Hawkinson's a star. Michael Mayer, he's had a few highlight plays this year for his rookie season, but this offense is inconsistent. There's not really anyone you could trust week in and week out. Devontae Adams, he's had some great games and some games where he's disappeared. And Josh Jacobs as well, so he's a sit. Is Michael Mayer in an inconsistent offense? Buffalo Bills at the Kansas City Chiefs. Dalton Kincaid, one of the better tight ends in the league already. Him and Sam Laporte, the 2 rookie tight ends, really jumping up the rankings over the last few weeks, where Kincaid pretty much is the second option in this passing game, in my opinion, behind Stephon Diggs. Gabe Davis has been inconsistent. Khalil Shakir has been more, obviously, of a slot guy in usage when they really need him to make some plays. So Dalton Kincaid, work in the middle of the field. He's been a matchup problem. When he was the 26th pick overall, for a reason, he's a star. Travis Kelce is a star. Each and every week he puts up numbers. I know he's not putting up those monster numbers like he did last season, but the points are still there for Travis Kelce. He's still the main target on the offense, and he's still going to go out there and make plays. And in big games like this, he usually puts in monster performances. Denver Broncos at the Los Angeles Chargers. Adam Trautman, he hasn't really done much this season. I know he had a few ball games where the points have went up over the last few weeks, but like I've said in a lot of videos this year, this Denver Bronco team, it's pretty much running the football and Russell Wilson dumping off a lot to his running backs and Cortland Sutton being the deep ball threat. Besides that, not really much going on in this offense. Adam Trautman's a sit in this one. Greg Dulcich, he definitely could come back in this game after he's pretty much been out the whole season with injury. And he could return, but Greg Dulcich, he's still not a tight end I would have confidence in. Like I said, he's only played 2 games this season. I know last year, towards the end of the year, he was injured and came back as well, finishing with 400 yards and 2 touchdowns. But Greg Dulcich, even if he returns, is a sit. Gerald Everett, he's a start for me. Everett, the last few weeks, he's been a vocal point in this offense behind Keenan Allen. The number 2 target, the other wide receivers really haven't done much. Jalen Guyton, he hasn't done anything. Quentin Johnson, he's been a bust so far in his first season with this Charger team, dropping a lot of passes and not really a good route runner. So Gerald Everett as the tight end behind Allen is the number 1 receiver on this team here. He's making plays and he's been a goal line threat. So the last few weeks, the points have been decent, anywhere from 8 to 12 fantasy points. And this week here in a mini shootout, possibly indoors at least, once again, for this Charger team versus the Broncos. He's a start. Dallas Eagles at the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Goedert, I think he's going to return in this game. He practiced towards the end of the week last week going into that game versus the 49ers, but obviously didn't play. And this is a big game now for the division pretty much with the Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys. So Goddard broke that forearm many weeks ago versus Cowboy team. And, revenge is possibly on his mind to go out there and have a big ball game and stick it to the Cowboys. And this week, Dallas Goedert, if he does play, is definitely a start. Jake Ferguson is a start for me once again as well. And Ferguson, it's been a solid season. The Cowboys lost Dalton Schultz in free agency, but Ferguson pretty much has had a better season than Dalton Schultz. And him and Dak Prescott, they're locked in. Dak Prescott throughout his career has always liked targeting the tight end. Ferguson's been the number 2 target in this passing game behind CeeDee Lamb, and in a potential shootout between these NFC East rivals. He's a start. Green Bay Packers at the Giants' first of 2 Monday night games. Tucker Kraft, he's been filling in for Luke Musgrave. And we know Kraft, he had a touchdown on Thanksgiving versus the Detroit Lions. But last week's game, he really didn't do much. Only 3 catches, 37 yards versus the Chiefs. So he's a sit for me as Tucker Kraft. Now to the New York Giants, Darren Waller possibly could return in this game. And believe it or not, this Giant team has an outside shot of making the playoffs. Obviously, they pretty much got to win out and stuff, but they're playing with some confidence. Tommy DeVito's been playing good football, and Darren Waller, he would be a nice addition back to the lineup for this Giant team. So right now, it's a wait and approach to see for this Giants, and obviously, it's a Monday night game, so fantasy owners, they really got to wait and see the practice reports and see if he's going to play. Darren Waller, he really wasn't doing much on the season before he went down with injury, but with Tommy DeVito in there in the starting lineup, he's looked like the better quarterback out of Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor this season. But Darren Waller, a borderline option. Daniel Bellinger, a sit for me as well. Daniel Bellinger, we know he's a tight end that's made some plays over the season this year and last year as well, but the consistency really hasn't been there, where he's pretty much maxing out at 5-6 fantasy points, and he's a sit. And final game of the week, the second Monday night, Tennessee Titans at the Miami Dolphins. Chig Okonkwo, he's a sit for me. Okonkwo, the last few weeks, the numbers have definitely gone up, and he's been the number 2 target in the passing game behind DeAndre Hopkins. And I know in this game it could be a matchup where the Titans are down 10-14 points out of the gate versus high-powered Miami Dolphin offense. Okonkwo, we know, is an athletic tight end. We know towards the end of the last season he was making plays and putting up fantasy points, but I got to see just a little bit more to have him in your starting lineup consistently week in and week out. So he's a sit. And Durham Smythe, he hasn't done much this season. I thought coming into the year he could be a sneaky red zone and big target for this Dolphin team, but it's all about Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Mostert, and Kane out of the backfield, and rightfully so. So he's a sit. So that tight end starts sits every matchup for Week 14 of the fantasy football season.